A video that piqued my interest recently was one that popped up in my recommendations from a journalist, broadcaster, sort of kind of person who frequents places like LBC and Talk Radio, if you know who they are. They're sort of, I suppose, the modern version of the shock jock kind of radio stations where they get highly animated about every topic under the sun, and but with a sort of political bias depending on who's presenting at that particular time, you know. Yeah, I sometimes watch these programmes. If a topic comes up that is of, you know, particular interest, they sort of like just appear in the recommendations as options. I think the most common one is Mr. O'Brien, but yeah, no, I'm not going to review one of his. You know, when I was younger, I used to listen to a lot of radio, and I think I was about 10 or 11. I phoned one up once, you know, to answer some kind of quiz question maybe, or give my thoughts about something. I can't really remember, but they sent me some records, and that was nice, you know. But yeah, so I sort of from a young age, and I know how these programs work, as it were, you know. So I don't really watch them very much or listen to them very much anymore, because sort of like you can only do so much before you figure out, you know, how they operate or whatever, and it all becomes a bit mundane, you know. Person phones up with opinion. You know, I think cows are too big nowadays. The cows used to be quite small when I was younger, and the presenter says, "Oh right, oh, really? Have you got stats to back that up?" And it's like, "Well, no, you know, it's just like, well, thank you very much for calling, bye." And then, you know, it's you know, then they say, "Oh, what a loony presenter," and then they can put the clip on, and you know, I mean, not a loony presenter, what a loony phone caller, you know, and you can have your loony phone caller of the day or whatever on your clip. Anyway, so this bloke came up who I haven't seen before, but his YouTube history suggests it's sort of like he's worked for these companies, and you know, he sits there and does similar things in his videos. And I don't know if he does phone-ins or if he's one that just waffles his own opinion. I didn't get that into it, because this is like my first exposure to him, and it wasn't really the video itself, and it was more, you know, the reaction it got from me, because it's sort of like he managed to find something that's sort of like deep within my psyche, and it interested me, you know. And he was going on about how he wanted to declare open season on, I think it's some scout leaders in Swindon or something like that. I mean, the clip I'll show, if it's still up, you know, you can get all the details from that. In this particular instance, he wasn't reporting on somebody else. He was giving his own story, his own experience. And he was complaining that he's had a very negative experience when he was about 7 years old, because he went to a cub or scout camp. I think he said he was 7 at the time, something like that anyway. And they wanted him to get naked, you know, for the funsies. And not just him, you know, everybody. They were doing a big nude-a-thon. Apart from the scout leaders or whatever. This is his story. And you know, he himself was sort of like, he felt humiliated by it, and you know, it was sort of like looking back on it from the modern perspective. He's thinking like, were these scout leaders up to no good? In every way you can imagine, you know, as the modern concept of naked people, how people think about that nowadays, you know. And he wants to declare open season on these scout people on Swindon, and have everybody tell him whether any of them have had any sexual experiences with these scout leaders. Was their desire to nudify everybody for a bit of fun one night. You know, did it have ulterior motives? What I took interest in is that he said he felt humiliated, and you know, I have an incident in my memory which is very similar. You know, I was at primary school, which in American I think is elementary school, possibly. Yeah, anyway, about 5 years old. So a couple of years before his incident in age relation terms, you know, I was about 5 years old. And anyway, everybody was getting naked, and I didn't want to. And you know, the teachers came over and said, you know, well, you've got to get naked, that's what we're doing, you know. And I was like, no, I don't want to, no. And just, I didn't want to do it. First, you know, it's the first experience of being asked to get naked in a situation that wasn't like family related, I suppose, home related, I don't know how you want to describe it, but like, you know, somebody else has said, come on, you've got to get naked. And yeah, I screamed the house down, or the school down, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, this went on, and I dragged it on, and more teachers came and sort of like, you know, get the dinner ladies in, you know. They didn't really know what to do with me, I suppose, because I was the only one doing that. And, you know, I was the only one that found it, you know, a bit unusual. The problem was, you know, it was sort of like, we're trying to teach you how to swim. And in order to teach people how to swim, they've got to get their kit off and put their trunks on. And so all the other kids were like getting their kit off and putting their trunks on, and I was just standing there screaming, saying, oh, I don't want to do it. You know, it's a very memorable experience, and I can relate in that, yeah, it was sort of like, I suppose a sense of humiliation, I don't know. So eventually, yeah, they, I think somehow must have figured out a way for me to be secured. I think I remember them sort of like holding up lots and lots of towels, so effectively they'd created my own personal dressing room. You know, probably a sort of a bit like Oliver, you know, asking for more. It's like, they're like, what the fuck, you know, and they, but in this case, you know, rather than getting shouted at, they actually made an effort to like try and make me a private dressing room out of towels and what have you, you know. And I got in the trunks, and you know, I got in the water, and it's like, oh, I don't go in the water, and you know, oh, no, I don't want scary stuff, water and all that kind of thing. And you know, after that first day, you know, and getting used to it, and I think I was pretty much normal after that. And you know, I can enjoy swimming now. You know, it didn't take long to get into it, but the initial bit scary, you know. You realise, you know, in these swimming sessions, you know, some of the kids, the whole concept of getting naked was wonderful for them. They really enjoyed it. You know, some of them were like running around the entire school playing field waving their towel in the air, you know, you know, completely naked, because that was all great fun. And so, you know, I mean, most of them were just sort of like, I suppose what we class as normal. They just got their kit off, put their trunks on, came home, got changed a bit. And it didn't, you know, it was water off a duck's back, you know, it didn't make any difference to them whatsoever. But like, in this one scenario of me at this primary school, you've got me at the one end of the spectrum, like, sort of like extreme prude, you know, shyness levels that would, you know, make a nerd in a library go, oh my God, that's chronically shy, you know. And on the other hand, you've got the other extreme of the, you know, you've got kids running around, you know, that's sort of like a perfect example of the human spectrum right there, you know. You know, what's classed as fun might be miserable for somebody else. But at the same time, what's miserable for somebody else might be just a jolly old good bit of fun for another person, you know. And, you know, I can guarantee there was no sexual activity involved. In fact, you know, in all further instances of me requiring to be naked in public throughout my childhood, you know, be it in PE shower rooms at secondary school or high school, whatever you want to call it, or you know, going out with friends on a, you know, when you're sort of like coming into teenagers and somebody suggests skinny dipping or whatever, you know, and like, so, you know, some people are instantly loving the idea, others are like, you know, and I'd have been one of the, for all these episodes I can think of where I've been required by somebody random to, or not random, but the social thing is just to be naked for whatever reason. You know, I'm afraid no sex was involved anywhere. I can't report that anybody really showed any interest in having sex with me. Yeah, never mind. But anyway, the you know, the thing is, and it's just this human thing again, and you know, it made me think about the human condition, and that often societies can get entirely based on human personality in this way, in that if the person in charge is somebody like me who's just chronically shy when it comes to public nudity, for what, you know, I don't know why I have this condition. You know, I'm one of those people that doesn't even like urinals in toilets. I try and use an urinal in a toilet and it's like I can't go, there's some kind of physical thing that blocks up in my pipes, and I just, even if there's nobody else in the room, weirdly enough, you know, I just stand there and nothing happens, and I was like, I thought I needed a piss, so I came to the loo because I thought I needed a piss, why isn't it working? But then if I just then rush in, just go into the cubicle, close the door, in a sort of claustrophobic space now, it's like it all relaxes and, oh, I did need the loo, it's just for some reason, you know, I don't know if that's related to it, it could be, it could just be a sort of human personality of shyness. The other people, they can go in the, you know, in the toilets and, you know, legs wide apart, straight out front, and, you know, they've got crowds of people looking over their shoulders, you know, it's no, might even love it, you know. You know, I can't use urinals unless, like, I've got so much water in me that if I don't use the urinal, I'll probably piss myself anyway. And anyway, that's sort of, is that off topic? I don't know if that's off topic. I think it's the same thing, you know what I mean? The sense of shyness, and how, for some reason, I just seem to have been born shy. I don't seem to have any control over it, you know. I've tried to... I've tried to be more confident in my nudity and my urinal use, and I've made many attempts to, like, grow up, as the word, you know, or whatever, and be manly and all that, and it doesn't work. It's just something inherent in me is sort of like, don't do that. But on the other hand, you've got these other people that are the complete opposite. They seem to have just been born with zero social inhibitions to their nudity, and, you know, they're fine with the toilets, and it's part of their manliness to take their position and dominate the urinal scene and blast away and have a good look at everybody else's while they're doing it, you know, probably hoping they're looking at theirs, and I don't know, who knows. Anyway, when I'm watching this video, I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, it could be, he could be right. Maybe there was something funny going on. You know, like all the commenters responding to him, and it's like, yeah, I wish you the best of luck in your hunt, you know, but I don't think nudity by itself is sort of like the same as sex. I don't think you can encounter nudity and then automatically assume negative connotations, because they seem to be two completely different things. Oh, not completely different, I mean, oh yeah, I mean, that's that whole thing about painting nudes versus pornography, you know what I mean? It's sort of like art, pornography, same thing, no they're not, you know, and it's sort of a similar thing really, nudity, sex, I mean, are they automatically associated? Is nudity just fun? You know what I mean? Can nudity just be fun? Can it just be liberating for those that find it fun? But yeah, this human condition, it's like you can have entire societies based on shy people, where rules come in where statues have to have olive leaves put on them, you know. The greatest artists of all time, Michelangelo, you know, or whatever, Leonardo da Vinci's works, it's, you know, they're artists, they have boobs and dicks in their pictures, you know, it's what they do, it's all about painting the human form, you know, the whole, you know, that bloke standing in a star shape, you know. That's, you know, you can't really be an artist unless you're like good at making a representation of the human body, and you can't really do that without nudity, you know what I mean? Yeah, all these olive leaves getting put on all the great pieces of art, you know, and art galleries are having to shuffle away all the pictures of nudes into the basement, you know, and pretend they don't exist, you know, because the prudes are coming, you know. And it all gets a bit tragic and a bit OTT, you know what I mean. But on the other hand, you know, if a big nudity lover gets into power and it's like suddenly goes the other way, and all of a sudden everybody, you know, all the shy people are being bullied into getting naked all the time, and you know, the humiliation levels increase, and you know, we start being asked to get naked in the most bizarre situations, you know, and you know, you get the nude Olympics on telly or something, and it's like, well, it's not something I particularly want to watch, you know. Or I suppose it depends who's competing, but you know what I mean. But, you know, it's the Greeks used to do the Olympics naked, you know. That's the gag there. Anyway, but there you go. You know, it could just be that this particular incidents that this bloke's encountered with the Scouts could have just been that the leader of the pack at the time was one of those people who just thinks nakedness is a good old laugh. And you know, it says in the video that, you know, they were told that they were just going to be having some fun, you know, and for some people getting naked is just a bit of fun, it's a good laugh, you know. Another thing that piqued my interest about it is that while I'm chronically shy, and while I will always sort of like go, no, when people, you know, sort of like try and badger me into getting naked publicly, and why I will shy away from that, you know. Oh yeah, I've never liked orgies, you know. You know, I have had scenarios where, you know, I've been either invited to or situations that you might class as an orgy, and I thought they were rubbish, you know. It's like people make such a big deal out of it, and it's crap, you know. But anyway, that's a different. That's well, I feel with crap, you know, because anyway, that's just a different video. Anyway, so yeah, even though I'm like this sort of chronically shy person, I don't extrapolate that to mean I want to put olive leaves on things. You know, I don't want to cover up other people's nudity. I can understand that some people might consider that nudity is fun, because, you know, I do find nudity and fun, just not when I'm doing it, you know. If somebody else wants to get naked, yeah, I can have fun watching them get naked. I mean, it kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? But it doesn't mean I'm like perving on them. It's just like, you do what you want to do, and yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind looking at you naked. Well, it depends. Anyway, but you know what I mean? It's like, they have this naked bike ride in our town every year. And, you know, about 20 or 30 people all turn up, you know, completely stark naked on a public park and get on bicycles and go for a cycle round. And, you know, anyone passing by is sort of like, ooh, look at that, you know, and it's all a bit of fun, really. I don't believe there's sort of like, you know, it's like nudist beaches, you know. You either go to them or you don't, you know. And I'm not trying to denigrate this guy's intuition that he thinks there's something dodgy going on with this scout group or whatever. I mean, I think the nudity is not necessarily irrelevant, but I think if you take any organisation from 30 years ago and you hunted through every single person that was involved in them, statistically you're probably going to find yourself a sexual predator in there somewhere, you know. But whether they tend to occur whether there's nudity or not, don't they? It's I'm not entirely sure whether the nudity is the issue or whether the nudity was just a means for somebody to suspect, and then, you know, the second video he's had lots of people responding, but there wasn't, nobody's sort of mentioning any sex yet. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, you know. Of course it's possible, you know. But, you know, from my experiences, and I'm just sharing his experiences, and it's sort of like made me think of my experiences. And as I say, you know, all these experiences I've had in my life where I've sort of like unusually or usually or expectantly or unexpectedly been desired to be naked in public. Even though I'm a chronically shy person and probably a deeply suspicious person, I'd probably be, in his situation, I'd probably be thinking, oh, somebody's probably having some sex, aren't they, you know. But I think society as a whole would benefit if we didn't swing between the two extremities of chronic demonisation of nudity, and on the other hand we shouldn't sort of like live in a world where we're under pressure to get nude when we don't want to. You know, it'd be nice if we didn't have to oscillate between nudity or not nudity in society as some kind of binary. You're at the beach or whatever and somebody wants to strip off and go into the sea and have a bit of skinny dipping, you know, on a public beach. I don't think that should be indecent exposure. I think indecent exposure should be something a bit more substantially threatening to society than somebody just wanting to strip off and have a bit of fun, you know. Anyway, yeah, so that's why that video piqued my interest. It's a topic that I've kind of had to think about all my life. And